Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. Apologies for the slightly late start. And I'd like to welcome you to the QEM Heroes webinar series. I'm Christine Wood, and I serve as the Assistant Program Director for the Heroes Fellows Program at QEM. For more than 30 years, QEM has been a national catalyst for STEM education transformation and research capacity building. Currently, the QEM network serves nearly 900 colleges and universities and reaches more than 8,000 individuals nationwide. This webinar is part of the HEROES initiative. The HEROES program brings together researchers with experience in the federal government to lend their expertise and support to the STEM research and education communities. Our fellows are here to provide tools and tips for navigating the funding landscape, developing STEM programs and partnerships, and improving talent retention in in-demand fields. We hope this series promotes engagement with our HEROES fellows and provides valuable resources to our participants. During the webinar, we invite you to use the Q&A tool to ask questions, and we'll address questions at the end of the presentation. The webinar recordings and slides will be available in the QEM Resource Hub. By attending this webinar, you will be added to the QEM network and granted access to the Resource Hub. Today, I'm happy to introduce our presenter. Dr. Brad Lusk is a serial entrepreneur that has founded and served on the executive boards of multiple companies in the private and nonprofit sectors. Previously, he served as the principal investigator on a Phase 1 STTR project with the National Science Foundation, while serving as the CEO for a biotech firm called Prescient Technologies. He holds a PhD in biological design from Arizona State and has published several peer-reviewed articles on biotechnology, technology transfer, and equity in STEM. He's also served as a National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine Fellow at the Naval Research Lab, an American Association for the Advancement of Science Fellow at the U.S. Agency for International Development, and an Embassy Science Fellow with the U.S. Department of State. So I'll turn the floor over to Brad. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. Uh, so thank you for that introduction, Christine. Today, I want to talk to you about how to translate your ideas from the lab to the market. And in addition to that little background that Christine just gave you, I also want to mention that I am the former recipient of a Small Business Technology Transfer Research Grant or Small Business Innovation Research Grant from the National Science Foundation. And today, I really want to get everyone thinking about how it is that you can translate an idea you have. It could be from the lab. It could just be an idea that you have kind of in your brain that's been floating around, something that's completely disconnected from your work. But really, how it is it that you're going to take that idea that you have and get it out into the market? So before I start, let me see, maybe I need to do it manually. Yeah, there you go. So before I start, I have a few questions that I want to ask you all, just get an idea of where the audience is at. So I have two questions here to start out with, and you're going to answer both of them at the same time. For each question, you can put in multiple answers. So if you feel like, hey, maybe I have started an LLC and I've started a corporation, put multiple things down if you want. So the first thing I want to know is, have you ever started your own business? So let me know if you have, if you haven't, and you're thinking about it. If maybe none of these qualifies for you, you can go ahead and put other. Christine, are you sharing the poll?
Just launched.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So the poll's coming up. So that's the first question. And the second question you'll see on here on the poll is as you scroll down. Again, multiple answers are accepted. Let me see if my computer wants to move over to the next slide. Okay, there we go. Um, are you interested in technology transfer? And basically, I just want to know, have you ever thought about it? Have you ever thought about taking an idea and getting it out into the market? Is this something where you're like, I have no idea where to start? Maybe you have, maybe you've received federal dollars from it. Maybe you've received money from investors. Maybe it's complicated, right? So there's some other in between. Let me know. So I'll give everyone, oh, let's say about another minute or so to answer those. Okay. Let's do another maybe 10 seconds.
Okay.
All right, let's close it out and see what we got. All right, it looks like a few people have started an LLC, and a few people are open to the idea in terms of starting their own business. That's great. Love it. Um, let's see. Are you interested? I have no idea where to start. Yes, and I have no idea where to go from here. I love it. Just jumping right in. Uh, and then we have an other. Oh, very cool. So who, if you indicated the other, do you want to like maybe write in the chat or tell us what that other was or is? And then as you're writing that in, I'll go ahead and I'll move forward and maybe we can get to, I want to talk about that maybe a little bit um, uh, at the end, those kind of different ways that we're all thinking about technology transfer.
And the
Okay.
webinar chat has been open for everyone.
Okay, cool. And then it's hard. I can't see the webinar chat now. So if I don't get to you immediately, I might get to you at the end or something when I close my presentation out. But just know I'm not neglecting you. I just can't see what you're what you're writing. Okay. Um, oh no. Okay. So before I get into kind of the bulk of what I want to talk to you about today, I just want to do a quick refresher on something that Greg and I talked about in February. And so that is when you're thinking about transferring your technology from the lab into the market or your idea out into the market, um, you this kind of enables you to think about ways to diversify the money that you're bringing in to do conduct your research. But also with that diversity of money that's coming in, you need to also diversify or rethink how it is you're conducting your research and the kind of research that you're conducting. And so, two examples of funding that the US government offers for technology transfer are the Small Business Innovation Research Grant and the Small Business Technology Transfer Research Grant. And again, just as a quick reminder, these grants are a way for you to bring in money in multiple phases. In phase one, you're averaging around $200,000 that you can bring in to do technology transfer. In phase two, over $1 million generally that you can bring in to do technology transfer across a bunch of different federal agencies within the US government. Pretty much all of them or most of them offer an SBIR, STTR at this point. Um, and so again, I just want to quickly walk us through kind of the logic here in terms of you have an idea and you want to take that idea and make it something that's actually out being used by people in the real world. Okay, so what this chart is showing you is this blue line in the middle. That is kind of your break even point. That's where you have spent no money, no dollars. That red line is showing you how much money you're spending over time. So basically, the lower it goes, the more money you've spent, and the higher it goes, the more money that you're making. And as you go from left to right, you're moving through your development, the development process of your technology, right? So when we're starting on the left, this is where like the idea has sparked in our brain and we have the idea. And now what we need to do is take that idea, we need to conceptualize that idea, we need to test that idea in the lab. And once we get that idea, or that in the lab or whatever, it doesn't have to be in the lab. You can test the idea in your garage. It doesn't really matter. But you've eventually shown that this idea that I have is something that actually works. And now what you're thinking about with technology transfer is how do I connect that thing that works to someone who actually cares enough about it to gain value from it and potentially spend money on it, right? That's what I want to focus on today. And it's that same gap that the SBIR, STTR would help you with, right? So how do I get it from I have this tech that works, or I have this app that I've designed that works, or I have this rubric that I've designed that I think works. How do I get it from there to someone actually using it so that I can launch this product? And again, I just want to kind of come back to you're going to hear this phrase a lot, technology readiness level or TRL. TRL is basically just telling you at what stage is the thing, the idea that you have, at what stage is it towards being commercially deployed and developed, right? If you have the idea of something, that is TRL one. Like the technology readiness level is one. It's in my brain. I have an idea, right? Then I can come up with a concept for how that thing might be something we can interact with. Then I'm going to start proving that out. TRL 3 is generally like the stuff that we start doing in the lab, like we get research funding in and we're kind of determining whether or not this idea that we have works. And then when you get to TRL 4, maybe, oh, your research has gone well and now you validate it in the lab, right? And then how is it that we're going to get that thing that we validated in the lab? Maybe we've gotten traditional funding from from a government agency to do that. How is it we're going to demonstrate that in a way that's relevant to the environment? In other words, how are we going to demonstrate it in a way that's relevant to your market? Well, you need to understand what your market is and what's relevant to them. And so this is a big part of, again, where the SBIR, STTR comes in, but where the technology transfer really starts to happen is how do I know what a relevant market is so I can go out and determine whether or not my thing works in that relevant market? And as you're working on this and you're thinking about, right now you might be thinking about how is it I can diversify the funding that's coming in, right? When you have your research concept or you have this idea in your brain, generally, the money you're going to raise is what's called the seed stage. And the seed stage, it could literally be you. You're funding yourself. It could be your spouse. It could be family members. Oftentimes at the seed stage, you're asking people that you know that believe in you to kind of pitch in some money. And generally, this is going to be smaller amounts, right? Not all of us have like some uncle or some aunt that has a few $1 million laying around that they're willing to throw at you. This might be something that you do. You get some crowdfunding. You have someone that has a few $100s that can help you maybe build your Arduino board or whatever it is that you're working on so that, you have the raw materials that you need to kind of start putting stuff together. As you're building that and you're starting to see, oh, this thing could work, then you're going to start talking to people. Maybe it's groups of individuals within your communities, angel investor groups that come through. Maybe it's people that give endowments to the school or the university that you're working on, right? These people who generally have larger checkbooks and will write you, $100,000 or a few $100,000 to start developing it. But if you look at this x-axis on the bottom, the point is as you move from getting small amounts of money from maybe people that you know more to larger amounts of money from investors that you're having to convince your product really has value because they're going to start writing, $10 million, things like that. You have to move from your concept research into your actual business planning and product development and commercialization. And again, how do you get from your research concept to it actually being used in the market in a relevant way? You have to know who is your customer and who is that market. So that's what I want to talk to you about today. How is it that you get your idea that you have your technology in the lab actually transferred out into the market? How is it you understand what that market actually needs? One more slide before I get to that. Um, this is very recent. So the SBIR STTR, the funding has not been available since August or September of last year due to a lapse. And just as of March 17th, so a few weeks ago, the House and the Senate have both agreed to reinstate the SBIR STTR funding through the Small Business Innovation and Economic Security Act. So this is awaiting on the president to sign this bill. However, there is a kind of 10-day clause for things like this that is so basically that means if the president doesn't sign it or veto it, but it's been passed by the House and the Senate, it can automatically become law. And that is set to happen this week. And so SBIR and STTR funding may be available as early as this week. So what that means is keep a lookout for agencies to start releasing again these calls for proposals for SBIR and STTR funding. And one more thing is I have put my email address on every single slide. Please, if you are interested, once the SBR and STTR funding comes back out, again, no guarantee it will, but it's pretty likely that it will. If you're interested in applying for one of those grants, reach out to me, talk to me. I have successfully put one together for phase one. And even if I'm not in your particular market or industry, there's probably a QEM fellow who is. So we can work with you to help you take your idea from the lab out into the market. Okay. So this is what I really want to talk to you about today. If you're applying for an SBIR or an STTR grant, if you are asking someone to give you money to make your thing, whatever it is you have, your rubric, your curriculum, your technology, your app, if you want someone to fund you to take that from the lab or from your garage and out into the market, you're going to have to present them with something called the commercialization plan. On the SBIR and STTR grant, this is what they call it. These are the exact words they use for the commercialization plan. As a matter of fact, I just copied and pasted this from the National Science Foundation's SBIR program. So they're going to want from you what's called the market opportunity, the company and team, the product technology and that you're developing and the competition, and a finance and revenue model. And so I have bolded one, three, and four, the market opportunity, the product technology and competition, and the finance and revenue model, because those are the things I want to talk to you about today. How to build a good company and team is something else that I would love to talk to you about and can. So reach out, or at the end, I'm going to ask, what is it you want to hear about next? Let me know if that's what you want to hear about next, and we could talk about that. So what do we need in the commercialization plan? Generally, I'm not someone who likes to do black text on a white background, but I think this is really important for you to have this information. And you can download these slideshows after so that you have this when you're kind of going through and developing a commercialization plan, because I want you to have this verbatim so that you know what it is. So in your commercialization plan, you want to concisely convey, and I'm going to define all these terms on the next slide, all the ones that I bolded here. Okay. You want to concisely convey the business opportunity that's enabled by your innovation, the compelling value proposition for the intended customers, the key points of a plan appropriate for the company's stage of development, the status of the effort to date, and also to map out a strategy for your business moving forward, the current and anticipated commercial landscape and the resources required to address the opportunity enabled by your idea or your invention, your company's vision for the enterprise and how the proposed innovation fits into the future market, as well as the current market. A commercialization plan, also develop a commercialization plan with careful analysis of the company's position within the industry and the market opportunity that is enabled by your idea. All of your assumptions should be clearly stated, and you also need to have evidence and validation of anything that you're putting in the commercialization plan. So think about your commercialization plan and understanding your market the same way you would a science experiment, right? You develop this tech and you have a hypothesis for who cares. It's literally just a hypothesis. You actually have no idea who cares until you go out and you validate and you have evidence that those are the people who care about it. And oftentimes what happens is you go to validate it and you were completely wrong about who cares about your thing and why they care about it and what value you bring them. And what you have to do is adjust your expectations as you move forward. So let's define some of those terms. What do we mean by business opportunity? We want to know what differentiates your business from others in the market, right? So I'm going to use this analogy here, right? Say that we're creating dash cams that we're going to install in self-driving vehicles that are rideshare apps, right? And so you have developed this camera that's going to go in a self-driving vehicle for rideshare app. And let's say that your camera has a, a kind of AI that's integrated into it that enables you to have 99% detection of someone else in the car that didn't order the app, right? Let's say you have that. So what's your market opportunity? So you want to know what's the size of your market, including the specific market slice that you want to serve, right? So your market opportunity might be self-driving cars, and your slice within that is self-driving cars that are used by ride shares, that are used by people who are ordering ride shares, right? What's the value proposition, right? What's the quantifiable value that you bring to the market? It could have something to do with money. It could have something to do with safety, right? Let's say, oh, the value that I'm bringing to that market is I'm increasing safety in rideshare apps by having a 99.9% accuracy that I could detect whether or not there's someone else in the vehicle when someone's getting in that shouldn't be in the vehicle, right? Who is your customer? Your customer is who's going to spend money on the product, right? In that case, is your customer the person that's in the rideshare? They're not buying the dash cam, so that's probably not your customer. Your customer is probably the company that owns the rideshare, right? That might be Waymo, it might be Lyft, it might be Uber. That might be your customer. And that customer is going to care about the bottom line of their safety, which is might be different than the customer that ultimately Uber is serving, right? They also care about safety, but they're not necessarily the people who are going to buy your thing, which gets me into the next thing. What's your beachhead market? What's your primary market? In this case, your beachhead market is going to be the Waymos, the Ubers, the Lyfts. But maybe a secondary market is you do consider in the future, maybe I can focus sales on direct to consumer. Maybe I can focus my sales on people who do own self-driving cars and they're just concerned about whether or not someone's waiting in the back of their car when they get in, right? That could be an excellent secondary market. But they're going to want to know who's your beachhead market, who are you focusing on now? And this is generally what you're going to see when you're applying for funding or money. People always want to know what's your focus, what's your focus, what's your focus. The more focused you are, the more likely you're going to be to bring in that revenue initially. Um, your commercial landscape. Who else is offering similar stuff, right? There are other dash cams out there. Who else is offering them? Are they competing with you? If so, what do you offer that those ones don't? Are there complementary products? Are there people that build mounts for dash cams? Is that someone that you could work with? Is that someone that you could distribute with? Right? What resources are required? Do you need business partners? Do you need people that build dash cams? Do you need employees to make sales? Do you need investment from investors? All the resources that your company needs, right? Your future market. People want to see that you are anticipating how your market will change and how you will adapt, right? Once you're bringing in revenue, things are going to change and they want to make sure that you can continue to bring in revenue and they want to know that you're thinking about that. Evidence of validation. Have you sold any products? Have you got any investment? This could also be, think outside just the validation you're getting in the lab. You probably have a lot of quantitative data from the lab that shows that, yes, you're able to detect these things. But do you have quantitative data that shows that people actually care to use them and install them? Qualitative data. What's the experience of the customers that have been using your thing? What's the experience of people that you've tested your thing with? Because maybe you don't have any customers yet. And then customer discovery, which I'm going to talk to you about next, which is basically where you're going out and you're interviewing people who could potentially be your customers or who are relevant in your field and figuring out what it is that they care about and whether or not that's relevant to them. And finally, product market fit. You're going to hear product market fit a lot. The two things you're going to hear a lot out of this slide, value proposition. Everyone say, what's your value prop? What's your value prop? What's your value prop? And do you have product market fit? And it's pretty simple. Like once you validated that you have a market and you know the value of the product in the market, and you have a customer that's going to purchase it in a manner that makes your business sustainable, in other words, you're able to bring in revenue that exceeds your operational and capital costs, then you have product market fit. So I have a product and I have a market and I have a sustainable business. And so while you're going through all of this, something that's very useful to keep, excuse me, I'm going to need a drink just quick. Something that is useful to kind of keep track of all this data as you're getting it is this table called the business model canvas. And so as you're going through and you're figuring out about your market, you want to keep track of who are your key partners. These might be companies that you need to work with. Again, this might be the person that makes the mount for your dash cam. This might be the company that's able to build your dash cam. Key activities. What are some of the things you need to do to enter the market? Do you need to install a pilot somewhere? Do you need to hire an engineer? Key resources. What are some of the resources that your company needs? Again, this could be employees that you need to hire. It could be intellectual property that you need to finalize. It could be the amount of money that you need to raise. Your value propositions. Again, remember, as you're building this business model canvas, this is going to change a lot as you talk to more people and you discover who actually cares about what, right? So you can start out with your assumptions and realize that your assumptions are probably quickly going to change. So again, your value prop might be, my dash cam enables 99.9% detection of people in a car that aren't supposed to be in the car, right? Customer relationships. How do you build customer relationships within your market, right? Markets are going to vary in terms of how you build customer relationships. Some are going to be almost exclusively in-person one-on-one conversations. Other ones are going to be, online, across the country, across the world conversations. Some of them are going to be LinkedIn. Some of them are going to be people who like to go to conferences. It's really going to depend on your market. What channels are you selling through? You can think about all the different channels that you use to buy things. Do you buy your groceries at a brick and mortar store? Do you buy your groceries on Amazon? Say your idea was a food truck. What channels do you use to sell items? You need to go to a conference, you need to go to a place where people will buy stuff out of your food truck. What are your sales channels? Your customer segments, again, who's your beachhead market? Who cares? And then who else might be secondary markets later down the road? Your cost structure, right? what are the costs of your approach? Do you have a really high upfront cost? Like you're manufacturing a tech. Do you have a really high upfront cost and a really high distribution cost, and then a really high cost of purchasing the item? Or do you have a low upfront cost? Like maybe you have a low distribution cost. Maybe it's an app, right? These are all things that matter because they determine overall like what your revenue model is going to look like and how it's going to need to be in order for you to become profitable. And then you have revenue streams. How are you making money? Are you, are you selling DVDs or are you charging people a monthly subscription to stream them online, right? What are the different revenue streams that you're going to have? Are you selling someone a car? Are you leasing them a car? Are you selling someone a dash cam? Are you renting out these dash cams to the rideshare apps? Just think about what those revenue streams are going to be as you're moving through. Okay, so when people talk about market opportunity, you're also going to hear these acronyms a lot. You're going to hear things like TAM, SAM, SOM, and then the early adopters. I think this was like the one I took this from. It said Evangela, whatever. Anyway, there's all different terms for what people might call early adopters. But when you're thinking about your market opportunity and the size of your market, right? When you're developing your commercialization plan, they want to know what's the size of your market. I generally start at early adopters. I start small. Who's going to be the most likely person to buy my thing? The most likely people to buy my dash cam, maybe that's a local company that has a few different rideshare cars that they use, and this could be a small contract. Maybe this is a company that is like super on the cutting edge, the bleeding edge of their field, and they like to invest in things that cost a lot upfront in order to get them down to, in order to help scale so that they can become cheaper over time, right? But you want to think about who are the people that are going to, buy this immediately, and that's going to be your smallest slice of the pie. Then I like to then explode it up and think big. What's my total addressable market? My total addressable market with the dash cam thing, that could be any self-driving car that exists in the world, right? And then I want to think about, okay, well, what's the available market within my beachhead? That might be, okay, self-driving cars that are used on rideshare apps. And then my obtainable market might be self-driving cars that are used by Waymo, right? That might be an obtainable market to start with. And that might expand out. And then it might become Lyft. It might become Uber as you grow out and get bigger. So this is what people mean when we're talking about TAM, SAM, SOM in early adopters. Okay, so then what do we need to do in order to understand what what our customers actually care about so that we can put together this commercialization plan? And that is, listen, the last thing that anybody wants is for you to show up and give them a pitch about a product they don't need for a problem they don't have at a price they're not willing to pay for it from someone that they've never met, right? So what you want to do is you want to go out and you want to interview people to figure out what needs does this market actually have? Is it something that I'm even addressing? Does my hypothesis for my technology, can I validate it or do I need to throw that hypothesis away? And what you might find out is you've developed this technology, you thought it was going to be relevant to this market, you go out into the market, you hear what people have to say, and you realize, oh, actually, nobody cares about this, and I don't have the means or the resources to pivot in my lab. And that is actually great news because it means that you can stop spending all this time trying to bring something out into the market that isn't relevant to it, that you're end up spending a lot of time and money wasting. What you also might find out is I do have this saying and it is relevant, but not who I thought it was going to be relevant to. And then what you can do is pivot from talking to people that don't care to trying to talk to people that do. Okay. So, practical advice. How can you start this conversation? And so, on the top right of this slide, I put down some ideas for ways that you might consider talking to people. Something that I did after I received funding, you can go to the SBIR STTR site. You can go to the National Science Foundation site, for example, and you can look at a list of like 400 companies that have funding right now in either phase one or phase two. And you can look at what's the name of that company, what's the abstract for what they're doing, and what is the contact information for that company. And they already have that segmented. National Science Foundation already has it segmented by at least the research topic, right? Whether it's chemistry or engineering or whatever. And so you can just reach out to other companies that have received SBIRs and STTRs and start to have a conversation with them because oftentimes they're a company that has three people in it and they are also very interested in answering all these questions in their business model canvas that you are. So they're very likely to have a conversation with you. You can send emails. You can think about phone calls. LinkedIn is actually a great resource. Do you have someone at a company or a company that you're interested in talking to? You can go on LinkedIn and you can see, oh, do I have any contacts that are similar or the same that this person has? And can I ask those contacts to give me a warm introduction to this other person that I want to talk to? Because a warm introduction is always better than a cold email. Um, so here's an example of, and the last thing I want to say is you also want to find people who love to talk. And how do you find people who love to talk? Go to a conference that's relevant to your field. Just go to the website. Look at who the keynote speakers are. Look at who the speakers are. Look at who's going to be in the exhibitor hall. These are the people that are literally hired to talk about what they do in their market to people like you. So use those, use those keynote speakers and those speakers that are talking as a reference for people that you can talk, that can contact that you'll have a higher probability of being able to talk to. Um, a great way to start to think about how to start that conversation that I had great success with is just let them know, like right up front, I'm a student or I'm a teacher at XX school. If you're not affiliated with the school, you could just say, oh, hey, I've been working on X thing. You know, I'm looking to learn more about whatever market it is to better understand the needs you have and whether or not I'm going to be able to address them. Do you have 15 minutes with me to discuss what you do and how I might be able to help you achieve your goals or what would help you achieve your goals, right? So I can't emphasize enough. I put the link in here for where you can go see who's received SBIRs. I just remember that. Um, but the last thing that you want to do is call someone up or ask someone for a meeting and then just give them a pitch, right? Because you have actually no idea what they care about, and they probably don't care about hearing pitch 100 of the day about the next great thing that's going to revolutionize their field because they're getting that stuff all the time. So if you come to them and you honestly say like, "Hey, I'm just curious to learn about your market. Do you have 15 minutes?" And obviously be respectful of their time. Oftentimes, these conversations go much longer than 15 minutes. Once you start asking them about what they do and what their market needs or what they think is important, because people love talking about themselves. People love talking about what they think is important. So let them tell you that, right? And as you're doing it, make sure you're writing all that down. A few example questions I have, in addition to just, so you're going to lead in with that. And then when you're doing the interview through Zoom or over the phone or whatever, I had a chance to review your website, your booth, your seminar, or whatever. Can you tell me a bit about what you're doing? Why do you want to ask this question? You want to understand what they're doing. Uh, when you're doing this thing, what are the major roadblocks that you encounter? What are their pain points, right? Their pain points are things that you're going to want to address with your tech. So you need to understand what those pain points actually are, because if what you're doing isn't addressing a pain point, why do they care, right? What are the costs of those roadblocks? Costs. A lot of people think money, but costs might also be time. They might be money. They might be safety, right? I worked a lot with mines. Safety at a mining site is a really high priority, and sometimes if something costs more, oftentimes if something costs more, they don't care if the value it brings to safety is significant, right? Do I reduce labor costs? Do I reduce labor time, right? Do I make a process more efficient? You want to understand what the value is of addressing those pain points. What are the ways that you overcome those roadblocks? What are you doing now? You're understanding what they're using right now and what your potential competitors might be. What are the trade-offs of using the current roadblocks? Understand the value that you have over your competitors, right? You're asking them what the cost of using their competitors' approach or technology is. You might get to the point where you say, well, I have X and can do X that may be able to address X, right? Whatever roadblock you're having. Do you think this is useful to you? Or do you think it's useful to anyone you know? This helps you understand if you're addressing a need they have. And if you're not, it gives them an opportunity to let you know someone else they know that might find use from what you're doing. And this is also, just think about, this is a way to build your next interview, your next warm introduction to continue to discover more about what your customers actually care about. Um, Again, what value could something that solves this roadblock or this problem that you're having? This helps you understand the value of your approach. And then again, who are some other people that I should contact? Build that contact list. You always want to be gathering information as much as you can. And if you have a warm introduction, it's always, always, always better. And as you're going through these interviews and you're asking these questions, these are the questions you need to be answering internally, right? So you want to know who'd you talk to. You want to write down that obviously the name, but also the title of the individual. Why do you want to know the title of the individual? Well, within your market, right? You might be in a market that has giant corporations. These corporations have 8,000 people at them, right? I was in mining, right? There are these major mining firms and they have thousands of people at them. And I know, oh, this mine might really care about their water quality coming out the end. Right, but there's 8,000 people at that company. Who do you contact? Right? So you're going to start to learn over time there are certain titles, there's trends in titles of people that are hired by these companies, that those are the people that you want to talk to. And it helps you figure out who you should talk to if you're going to a new company based on the title. What did you think before the interview? Right? So, an example, I thought that the capital costs were going to be the primary factor in decision making, right? How much something costs to buy is going to be why this company wants to buy my thing. And I'm going to pitch them that my thing costs so much less and they're just going to, go head over heels to buy my stuff. And what you actually learn is, well, capital costs are insignificant because the operational costs are so high. In other words, capital costs are like 1% of their expenditures right now. And if you could save, 90% on 1%, you're still only saving them 0.1% of their overall costs. Maybe it's the other 99% of their operational costs that they actually care about. And so what does that tell you? Maybe I shouldn't go into a conversation telling them about how much I'm going to save them on capital expenditures because they just don't care that much, right? And then what are you going to do as a result of these learnings? Okay, now that I've learned this, I just gave you an example. How are you going to shift your perspective when you go into the next conversation? And that is maybe I'm not going to talk about capital costs because my market doesn't really seem to care. Um, a great way to do customer interviews. And again, you need to be cognizant of your market and the values of the norms of your market, right? So in mining's kind of old school. This conference is for a space exploration conference because I typed into Google, I want an image of a conference space, and it gave me a space conference. But anyway, so when you go to these conferences and you have these exhibitor halls, what you have here is a room full of people in your market that are paid to go to a conference to talk to you about their market, what they do in the market, the value they bring in the market. They might be showing off about who they're working for in the market. So, what greater place to go and just talk to people? You could talk from one vendor to the next, to the next, to the next. This is what I did. I got like 50 customer interviews in one weekend at a mining conference, just going from vendor to vendor to vendor. Also, these vendors, like a lot of them have been around for a while. And so they know the other vendors. They know who's new. They know who's been there a while. They know, these people get lunch together. Like they know like who is interested in the thing that you're doing. Like if the thing you're doing is super cutting edge and maybe not a lot of people have thought about it, they're going to know who has or who would really think that this is interesting. So they're going to be able to introduce you, right? And then you can go over to the vendor, that's, say 3 aisles over and you're going to say, oh, hey, the vendor over there told me to come talk to you about this specific thing. And this is why he or she thought it would be interesting to you. Can you tell me about that? And these people, the vendors, they're there to talk to you about it, right? So generally, I would go around vendor to vendor to vendor. And when I was done, my method was I would take a step back, I would have my notebook, and after talking to them for like 10, 15 minutes, I would write down everything that I could remember, right? Again, what's their name? What's their title? What's their company? What did we talk about? All the different things. In my particular field in mining, business cards are absolutely essential. If you go with a QR code and have someone scan it and say, "Oh, it's going to automatically upload my contact information into your phone," literally that never worked once for me within that particular market. So stay cognizant of what your market, like how it is that they operate. So the thing that I would do, I'd always have a business card. I would get their business card. I would write all their notes down. I would take a paper clip and I would paperclip their business card to that note page. And then I would go back later and I would type all of those notes in that I took on my notebook and all their business card information. And I would have that in a spreadsheet in a separate Word file. And I would hyperlink every single conversation I had back to anything I would ever write in an internal report for my business or for my commercialization plan that had to do with customer discovery and market validation. That way I could show I have validated this idea through these conversations. And if I have 4 or 5 different conversations that all point to the same realization about my market, that's pretty good market validation. Okay, so what did we learn by doing this customer discovery? Um, Again, here's just a few examples I have from questions that I was asking. Again, I was in the mining industry. But questions I was asking before I started customer discovery and after I started customer discovery, I'm not going to read them all out. I'll just read a few and give you an example. But my point is, as I went through that customer discovery process, my questions became much less vague and much more catered to that specific market. So instead of tell me about the process used to treat wastewater at your mine, that transitioned into tell me about the process that is used to recover metals during mining and recycling, including any aqueous materials or wastewater treatment that is used or produced in the process, right? Maybe they don't even use water. Maybe it's a dry process. And that's something that I'm starting to learn as I'm going through and figuring out, oh, I might be relevant to certain segments of this market, but not other segments because they don't have any water that I could possibly treat. Um, Again, you'll have this slideshow given to you, so you can read through the rest of those questions at the end. The other thing you want to do, you want to understand your ecosystem, right? So on this slide, I literally, it doesn't have to be pretty. I'm not a good artist. None of the things I ever did were pretty. They just have to have a logical flow, right? So at the center of my ecosystem is a mine or a metal refiner, right? And then I want to think of what are all the things that feed into this ecosystem. I have competition, I have other mines, I have regulators, I have slag, I have the equipment, I have intellectual property. These are all of the things in my ecosystem that exist, and I need to know where do I fit in that ecosystem, right? So I probably fit somewhere between the mine and the jewelry person, or the mine and the automotive industry, and the mine and the electronics fabricator. That's a proprietary process. There's a lot to that process, and this is just a circle representing it. So then I can go down and I can look into what is the workflow, right? Again, not pretty, but you're going to do this for your market. What's the workflow for how, whatever it is that you're trying to do, where do you fit into that workflow of your market? So here I'm showing we have water, we have regulators, we have electricity we need, we have recycling water, we have collection ponds, we have the material that's in the rock, we have other metals that are in the rock, we have nanopart, we have, there's so much stuff in this workflow. And you could literally see where I have just put circles and question marks where my technology might fit in. Again, this is from after I went to a conference in 2018, and we learned a lot since then. But you have to start somewhere and you have to start building out what does your workflow look like. This is another example. Before we did customer discovery, where does our technology fit in? Well, we know there's wastewater discharge, then we assume that our process goes there, and then we know that there's further extraction by the refiners, and finally the materials are extracted, right? We have basically four. By the end of that conference, I had 8 different parts of this ecosystem, and I figured out where we might fit in here. Again, this is going to continue. You're probably not going to be in mining. You're going to be in whatever industry you're in, but you need to think about how you're going to build out what your ecosystem is and where you fit in. Um, Also, you're going to learn what are the job titles you need, and you might need different job titles for different things. If you're trying to make sales, you might be talking to a president, you might be talking to a VP or director of environmental performance or sustainability or recycling. If you want more information about the market or operations, maybe there you're talking to an engineer or a geologist. You're not going to make the sell to the engineer or the geologist, but the engineer or the geologist might be the person who's actually using whatever it is that you have. And so you need to understand their pain points so you can take those back to the person that you're going to make the sell to and explain to them why the geologist cares. And you might even be able to get that geologist to advocate for you, right? If what you want to do is research and development with companies or maybe accelerators. So there are large companies out there that will fund small scale technologies that are really relevant to their market. Within mining, I discovered there are companies that will literally fund me if I have something that's relevant to their mine to develop it on their site. And so who do I need to talk to get in contact with for research and development funding or accelerator opportunities at the companies I'm trying to serve? Right? These might be the business development or innovation managers or senior managers, something like that. And then you're going to develop your customer archetype and priorities, right? So your customer archetype is going to have a certain job title. They're going to have an existing solution that they're already using. Um, they're going to have someone that they work with that makes the purchasing decision. Maybe your customer archetype is the person that's making that purchasing decision. That customer archetype is going to have a certain list of pains. Maybe they're not all the same, but they kind of follow a general motif. Um, you're going to want to know when you're talking to this customer archetype, what are the gains that you offer them? And you also want to be aware of what are the influencers that your customer archetype have? What does their team look like? Who do they listen to? Who do they have to talk to? And then generally, what barriers are your customer archetype going to have so that you have an idea of what barriers you're going in to kind of address. And then you're going to kind of put together a map of how are purchasing decisions made within your market, right? You have your technology, right? You need to, do you need to validate it? Do you need a pilot? Do you need to talk to regulators? Do you have to worry about regulations? Do you have to worry about environmental managers? Do you need to talk to other consultants? Do you need to, who do you need to convince? Who do you need to talk to ultimately to make that purchasing decision? And it might not be just one person. It might just not just be one branch at a company. It might be multiple branches and multiple managers and multiple divisions, right? So you want to put together what your purchasing decision roadmap looks like. And then you can come up with something called the solution decision criteria, right? And this is basically where you're laying out what is the company doing now and what is their satisfaction with it and how important is it to that company. And what you want to do is look for the region where the company has low satisfaction, but high importance for addressing those issues. Those are your top priorities, and those are the ones you want to talk to them about. So, in the case of mining, like what I discovered was companies are dissatisfied with the fact that they have large footprints. They want small footprints, but that's really hard to do. And so that's very important, and they have low satisfaction right now. Same with environmental compliance. And same with efficiency. Some of the mines have relatively low efficiency in their extraction process. So we want something with a small footprint that enables environmental compliance and that is very efficient at extracting metals. You can see here cost is important, but not as important as environmental compliance. Speed is important, but what they're doing right now is already plenty fast and already plenty predictable. So it's not really, if you tell them, oh, I can go faster, they're like, well, we already are pretty fast and we're already pretty predictable. So that's not really going to help you make that sale. Once you understand kind of all of these components within your market, like what's important to them, then you could start to understand what is my business model going to be and how is it that I'm going to bring in revenue, right? So you could think here as an example of something like Netflix, right? Netflix isn't, these arrows are used to indicate like how much revenue each of these different boxes will bring into their money, right? Netflix isn't really selling you anything. Maybe you got to buy a Roku or something, which is through a partner that they have. You don't really have to install or maintain anything, right? So these are kind of like maybe non-existent or small revenue streams for them. But subscription fees, that's where Netflix is bringing in most of their money, right? Think about when Netflix got rid of having to ship you DVDs, right? Like they don't have a revenue stream from services anymore or from shipping anymore, which might go in this middle one, right? But now there's subscription fee on the other end where they're kind of bringing you, selling you more of the streaming stuff. Maybe that becomes bigger. Maybe they charge more for that. Um, this again, this is just a take home to give you an example of what did we learn. This was our value proposition before customer discovery started, which was basically like, we're going to recover more critical minerals for you while minimizing environmental pollutants. And after customer discovery started, we basically said, oh, we can recover this percent of critical minerals for you, resulting in a recovery of this much dollars per year while meeting XY environmental compliance issues and a return on investment within X years, right? That just got so much more specific and so much more interesting to people who might want to fund your product so that you can put together this commercialization plan. And so again, as you're going through and you're getting this feedback from customers, you're going to go into your business model canvas and you can either do this digitally like I did, or you can put it on a board and you can get sticky notes and color code those sticky notes. Green is something you have high confidence in. Yellow is something you're still figuring out. Red is something that you have no idea still. And you can just start putting those on your business model canvas as you go through and you learn more and obviously upgrading from yellow or from red to yellow to green as you think you have validated more each of these different segments of your market. And so again, I just want to bring this back to, what's the point in doing all of this research for your customer discovery and talking about your market and putting together these roadmaps? And that is when you're being asked to develop a commercialization plan, either by an investor or by a government agency, and they say they want it validated, this is what they mean, right? So this is a lot different than when you're applying for other grants. They're not necessarily looking for the data that you've gathered in the lab as a way to validate your product, because there are a ton of cool things that people have come up with and invented at national labs, at universities that are really neat and lead to publications, but no one wants to buy, or there's no business plan for them, or no one has any roadmap for who's actually going to buy it, right? So the NSF, they want to know, do you have something that's not only interesting scientifically, but also have you validated that it's interesting, or that there is a market that is interested in it? Um, and so the last slide before I get to your final question, and that is basically, what do you want to learn about next? Um, So the National Science Foundation, I talked about this briefly with Greg back in February. The National Science Foundation has something called iCore, or Innovation Core. And the whole point of Innovation Core is to give you money to do customer discovery. And generally, the way it works is you do a regional program and then you do a national program. The regional, generally, the iCore program wants to be available for companies that have received some kind of NSF, or a technology or a lab, whatever's associated with your company. It doesn't have to be the company itself, but has received an NSF grant within the last 5 years. However, I have noticed some leniency in these regional programs where you can come in and you can say, oh, hey, I work at this university, or I work at this school, or I work with this professor, or I am this professor, and they might be willing to say, okay, hey, maybe we can get you into this regional program. But there are regional iCore programs that are all over the United States. They generally give you around $1,500. You work with them for 2 to 5 weeks. You do 20 to 30 customer interviews. And when you're done with this, you can talk with that regional program manager, the regional program person that led your class, and talk to them about, hey, do you think I would be eligible, or it would be good to move my company into the national program? And they'll be honest with you. And if they do think that you should go into the national program where you get $50,000 over a year to do 100 customer interviews, they will give you an endorsement to get into those national programs. I checked yesterday. The regional programs are active. The national programs are active right now. As a matter of fact, the one in the Northeast corridor is starting tomorrow, April 2nd. But as you can see, there are hubs all over the country. So I encourage you to go to this website down here, funding, nsf.gov, funding initiatives iCore, and look for a regional program that is relevant to you. With that, I will close with this final question so that I can know kind of what you want to talk about next, what you want me to talk to you about next. So Christine, if you want to go ahead and pull up that. And again, multiple answers are allowed, right? So it's not like A through K are all going to be different webinars. It might be, I can cover like 3 or 4 of these in a webinar. Maybe the workshop on writing an SBIR, STTR grant, specifically a workshop on writing the commercialization plan, that probably could be its own webinar. But some of these other things, maybe I could tie in and address a few. So while you're answering that question, I will um, come on. I'll just close out again by saying, my name is Brad Lusk. My email address, blusk@qem.org. Please send me an email if you are considering writing an SBIR, STTR, joining iCore, creating a commercialization plan, talking to investors. You just have a business idea and you want to know what's next. You're curious about any of the other things that were in this question that I just asked, building a team, business evaluation, budgeting, any of that, reach out. Um, we have other QEM events and webinars coming up. You can scan that QR code, check those out. If you want to learn more about the Heroes program, which is where all of us fellows are located at the QEM network, scan that QR code. And again, I would love to hear your feedback on this webinar and whether or not you found it useful. So please scan that feedback form. With that, I will go ahead and Christine, go ahead and close out the poll. And I will exit my sharing so I can read the chat. and kind of go over this poll. Okay, it looks like this is great. Okay, so I'll use these poll answers. We're going to save them and I'm going to use them to put together my next presentation. And it looks like, okay, there's a lot of ties in here. Okay, awesome. Okay, so if anyone has any questions, again, thank you for that poll. Thank you for that intel. If anyone has any questions, please either write them in the chat or go ahead and raise your hand. We have maybe time for one or two questions because we're right at the end.
Yeah, and please feel free to put your question in the Q&A box, the chat, or to raise your hand to come off mute. Brad, thank you so much for a really informative and information-rich talk today. I'm sure this is very valuable to our participants. In the absence of questions, I wanted to thank everyone for coming today and for joining us, and we hope to see you at a future webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming. I look forward to talking to you.